Hello friends, David Bose here. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. I'm in Arkansas visiting my daughter, heading back to Oklahoma. And I didn't get to do a video yesterday or the day before, so I thought I'd do a video on the way home. Well, you know, it's weird. I was just talking with my daughter and stuff about some things, and you know, she's going to school and taking a lot of classes. She's kind of getting into she's had some philosophical discussions with some of her students that go to school there and stuff. She's been taking philosophy, so there's some pretty strange conversations that go on. And I was listening to some of the things that people were talking about, and I had a really good, I felt really good about the conversation with my daughter, because I think for the first time we really talked for a while. We got into this whole concept of life really, really deep. I think she really grasped a few things in our conversation that maybe she hadn't even thought of before. But I started telling her about Moses and going up the mountain, as like I do in some of my videos. And she's seen the whole spiel before, but you know, she's having gone to college and university, she's now studied some of the Bhagavad Gita and Confucius and Aristotle and different teachings and thoughts. And when I was explaining to her, because you see, Christians are intelligent people, just as anyone else in the world. And we can usually tell when something's a parable or when it's supposed to be taken, if there's some nuances. We're smart people. And I'll give you an example of that, of how I can tell that we're smart people. I'll get back to the discussion that we had, but we got home last night and she said, "Dad, I want you to see this movie. It was amazing. It's called The Joker." And I was like, "What do you mean, The Joker? Is the guy that's having the big feud with Batman, you know, that Joker?" He goes, "Yeah, you know." And I said, "Well, who stars in it?" She goes, "Well, I don't know his name." I remember I said, I was thinking of, can't even think of his first name right now, Joaquin, and that's it. That was the guy that was starring in that movie. He was real thin. I don't know if he did that just for the movie or what, but he looked bad. I mean, he's an older guy. But she said, "You got to watch this," because she says a lot of people don't like it, but a lot of people are saying it's a really, really, really masterpiece. This is a movie. You got to watch it. She says, "Oh, it's the best movie I've ever seen, Dad." So I thought, oh man. I said, I don't really want to see it, you know. I mean, she says, "Oh, I'm gonna buy this movie and we're gonna watch it together." And I said, "Well, honey, that's fine, but," she put it up on the screen. It was like $20 to watch this movie. You had to pay for view or something. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of movie. We could go to the theater for that, see it in surround sound and everything else. But no, they're selling these movies for $20. I don't know where she bought it from or whatever it was, but she did something with the television. So I tried to say, "No, I don't want to see it," but she's like, "No, Dad, we're going to see this. I want you to see this." I said, "Okay." So we're watching this movie, and everybody who's ever seen Batman knows that Joker's the bad guy. He's a bad guy. But, you know, it's usually just playful fun in most of the earlier Batman movies. They don't get to the story, right? There's no psychology involved in who the Batman was or who... Well, there was. I remember one of the Batman movies, I don't know, some years ago, Not sure which one it was, but they did show a clip about Bruce Wayne having to watch his father die. And this is what made Bruce Wayne. Well, oh, buddy, this movie, The Joker, explains what made Bruce Wayne, or Batman, and it explains what really made the Joker the Joker. And my daughter was right. It was very compelling. It was very interesting. Halfway through that movie, you started feeling sorry for Joker. And I think by the end of the movie, you started, because it wasn't really about Bruce Wayne. He was, it did show how he watched his father die. And of course, his father ends up dying really because of Joker. Joker didn't kill him. There was riots and mob actions in the streets of Gotham City that killed his father, because his father was the mayor or something, or running for mayor, I'm not sure. A very powerful, rich, wealthy person. Well, Joker, when he was born, he thought in his own mind that there was something wrong with him, because he was always laughing at everything. Well, maybe it was a psychological effect, because he was nervous and people picked on him, and he was in the city, and he was trying to take care of his elderly mother. He took very good care of her. He was a very, very good man, and everybody abused him and beat him up, kicked him, kept losing his job for unjust reasons. It was a rough life for him, but he had a lot of loyalty, was a good man, that Joker. That's what they said. This is the way they're portraying it. It gets you to start feeling sorry for the Joker. You start to really feel like, oh, I see what this boy went through. And as he grew up, well, all of a sudden, you see, his mother was sending letters to Thomas Wayne, which is Bruce Wayne's dad. So this is sometime before. Bruce Wayne's just a little boy at this time. And I don't really want to give away the ending of the movie for any of you who are going to watch the movie, so I'll try not to do that. But I just want to get into something here. His mom kept asking him to check the mail when he comes home, because she was waiting for a letter from Thomas Wayne. And every day there was no mail. And it was kind of getting to, well, everything else that was going on. He was being beaten up and fired from his jobs, and beaten up on the subway, and a lot of stuff was going on. Made fun of, and everybody treated him like crap. Because every time he would get into a nervous situation, he'd start crying or laughing. People thought he was a geek, and he was a clown. That's what he did for a living. He was always trying to have a job where somehow it had to do with it being a clown. He had this clown face and stuff. Got fired. But one day, back to the thing where his mother was looking for this mail from Thomas Wayne, and he never got the mail. And so he started wondering, well, who's Thomas Wayne? Because he didn't even know who he was or who Bruce Wayne was at the time. And his mom says, well, that's your father. I had a relationship with Thomas Wayne, and he won't give us any money, and we're poor, and he needs to help you, son. That's your father. And he's like, oh, okay. So he says, well, I'll go talk to him. So he goes down to the courthouse or wherever it was. I don't know exactly, but and he makes his way in, and he some place where this guy was, and he meets him in the bathroom. He says, hey, I'm so and so. My mother is so and so, and you're my father. Thomas Wayne says, son, I'm not your father. Your mother was crazy. She made the whole thing up. He's like, that's not true. Don't you lie about me. Everybody's lying. Everybody's lying. And I don't understand why you have to lie about everything and make fun of us. I didn't want anything from you. I don't want nothing from you. I just wanted to say hi to my dad, you know? And Thomas Wayne says, you know what? And bah! Smacks him, just pops him right in the mouth. And up to this point, you know, the Joker had never used any violence or anything. He just, you know, went away humiliated and upset and angry. But before he left, Mr. Wayne says, your mother was in a mental hospital. She made the whole thing up. She abused you when you were little. And they took you away and you were adopted. You're not her son. She's crazy. This whole thing's made up. Well, he didn't believe him, so he goes down to this mental hospital and he goes into where the records are kept, and he says, I want to, know if my mother was ever here and what happened. So they found these records and they go, oh yeah, you're this right here, but I can't give you these records unless you go get some judge or something like that. I don't know. So there was a little hole through the bars, right, where the guy was behind the bars going through the records. He's talking to the guy real nice, you know, and the guy has the records kind of near the hole, and the Joker reaches in real quick and grabs the records and pulls them out. I mean, it was a struggle for a minute, but he got him. And he took off running. Man, he ran and ran and ran. And he found some place where he was quiet and alone. And he opened them up and started reading it. Turns out he was adopted. And Thomas Wayne was right. His mom was crazy. And he had been abused so badly as a child that was the reason that he had this emotional disturbance. And his mother had told him all along that there was something wrong with him. And she abused him. And that's what made him the way he was. But turns out he really didn't have any medical conditions or any real problems other than the fact that he thought there was something wrong with him, and he was insecure. So anyway, he ends up getting so angry at his mother that he murders his mother. And he realizes all of a sudden the reason he laughs like that is just who he is. He thinks, this is the way the movie goes. He thinks he's found out who he is, who he really is. He just thinks that evil is funny. That's just the way he is. He's not emotionally disturbed at all. It's just that all this time he wasn't accepting himself for who he was. So he started doing some dances and he started realizing I'm free. So he goes down to the subway and he gets on the subway. Some guy at work had given him a gun just to set him up so he'd get fired. So he ended up getting fired. So he had this gun with him. He's on the subway. And these three guys start harassing some woman, and he starts laughing. Because it's just the way he does when something uncomfortable is happening. And he can't stop laughing. So these three guys come over and say, what's so funny, Well, you want a taste of this? And they were going to beat him up. So they kicked him and threw him on the ground, started beating him and kicking him and kicking him. Finally, they start leaving there for dead, and he pulls out this gun and shoots him. Well, it was on the news that some guy with a clown face had killed these three people. And Gotham City was kind of rioting, and they started taking this guy as their hero. Joker didn't tell them to do it. They just started taking him as their hero, and they were doing acts of violence all around the place with their clown masks on. They started putting a few things together, and they found out that it might have been him that did it. So the police were after him. Well, he always spent a lot of time. He loved this one guy that was on television, kind of like a Johnny Carson type thing at night, had a talk show. And he always watched that every night with his mom or something. One day, I guess, I don't know if he went there often, but one time he was in the audience and he laughed, that weird laugh, and they put the spotlight on him and said, "What are you laughing about, boy?" And so he got a little bit of attention, and then the guy ended up showing a clip of him. He ended up getting a gig doing a comedy gig in one of the places downtown, and it was kind of a strange comedy skit where he just stood there and looked dumb and laughed and didn't know what to say. And then he made one comment that was kind of funny. So they put that on and started making fun of him. Well, this was a guy he loved very much. He watched him every night. He thought he was great. And then he was making fun of him. But this little clip, this little moment where he's got the spotlight on him in the audience, goes viral. And now everybody knows who he is, and they're talking about him. So this TV talk show, his secretary calls him and says, "Look, this thing's gone viral. We want you to come down and be interviewed on this talk show. Can you come Thursday night?" He said, "Yeah." So Thursday night he goes down there dressed in his clown face. And this is where it gets really interesting, and I won't tell you any more about it. But he does something very, very unique there. Anyway, by the end of the movie, you understand what made Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne. The town riots and kills his father. And now you know what made the Joker. And it basically, in the end, I think what's happening is they're trying to set you up for the idea or the concept that Bruce Wayne is good, but he's not so good. There was a reason, a psychological reason that made him that way. And the Joker's bad, but he's not so bad. There's a reason that he was bad. And we're supposed to understand that both of them were kind of crazy. Let's face it, one of them dressed up like a clown, and the other one's dressed up like a bat. Now, which one's crazier? One of them's got an excuse. Pretty bad excuse. He went through his entire life being beaten and abused and harassed. Truly, it did make him evil. In the movie, it shows just how he eventually accepted who he was, that he was evil and that he wanted to kill the bad people. And it made him, well, in the end, the whole town that were dressed, they were all dressed like clowns. They loved him. It was the first time anybody had ever loved him. All these criminals loved him because he stood up to the bad guys. So he liked that. So they're both a little odd. But Bruce Wayne, he was a billionaire, born with a silver spoon in his mouth. And yeah, he had to watch his father die. That was pretty traumatic. But it was nothing to what the Joker went through. So it's like, and I agree with a lot of the premises there. I actually agree with the whole premise that people who do very bad things, they got that way some way. They're mentally ill. They're very confused, perhaps. They may be on drugs. I mean, that was part of the whole thing. Because he had been on drugs most of his life, on these mental drugs, and he took a lot of them. And then the city decided they didn't have enough money to continue to help these people, so they just put him on the street. And this is the reason that he actually started acting really crazy to start with, is because they took him off his meds. So it wasn't his fault. It was the city. It was Thomas Wayne's fault for not funding the mentally ill facilities. And if he'd have stayed on his meds, maybe he wouldn't have done what he did. But problem with the movie that I see is that, see, the bad side, they're never completely ignorant. They're not stupid. What they're trying to do is come up with arguments to deceive you, to somehow get you so confused that you don't know what is right and what's wrong. That you don't know, okay, if bad is bad, then should we torture and murder the torturers? Shouldn't we hate the haters? And then that puts us back in that cycle, an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. So, there's some legitimate questions about that movie, but I think the problem is that a lot of people who don't know much about the Bible or ancient wisdom or esoteric wisdom, they haven't considered or pondered these amazing concepts that the Apostle Paul talked about. That we're not under law, but not all things are advantageous. What does it mean that we shouldn't do bad, but that we're not under law? Things like that. And what does it mean that we're under grace? Even in the New Testament, it says, well, if we're really under grace, then let us do evil that good may come. That we can have more grace. All right, let's do evil. That was something that people were saying to mock what Paul was saying. He said, well, you believe that we're under grace and we don't have to get punished for our sins. And we should just do more bad. More grace from God will come, and that will be good, right? Just do more evil. Like the wheel of confusing thought processes spinning, and people don't know what and who and to blame. Should we blame people in the inner cities are all passed out drunk on cocaine, the crack pipes or whatever. They're robbing robbing the corner stores, shooting one another. So they're just evil. But you don't take into consideration the fact that the elite are making money off of running drugs into the inner cities. And that a drug affects a person, makes you addicted, and makes you act differently than what you would. Joker was on drugs all his life, and he was told lies, and it confused him. He'd never been loved before. So yeah, you can have some sympathy for the Joker. So what do you do? What's the problem? And how do you fix it? See, they make it sound like it's just a huge problem. Well, the problem is you can't have law of any kind. That's what screwed it up. What made the world bad was having a law, an arbitrary law. The only law we could be under is the law of nature. It takes care of itself. And then everything quiets down. You have a village, a neighborhood. Somebody comes into the neighborhood, they go crazy, they eat some mushrooms or whatever, they start going crazy and they shoot people. All right. That's your child, a child of the community. You know that boy. You know he didn't mean it. He got some mushrooms. You know this. And so you don't treat him like a criminal. You realize, oh my goodness, this man's gotten into some mushrooms or something and he went crazy. And so you're better able to understand what's going on. Now, some criminal from down the road comes in to take your women. Maybe they're hungry, they didn't have a good crop that year, they come take your crops. Well, the community handles it. And look, if there's no law that says you can't, that you shouldn't murder, then there's going to be everybody's murdering now. Well, no, if there's no law that says you shouldn't murder, there's also no law that says you can't kill people that kill your people. It works both ways. So you say, well, you've got to have a law that says you can't murder. That way, if somebody comes into your town and starts murdering people, we'll have a law that says you can't murder. Well, wait a minute, then you can't get rid of him. can't murder him. You can't execute him because you can't murder. Oh, well, we'll make an exception for self-defense and people who are crazy, and we take them to court. And well, who takes them to court? Who's got time to start a bureaucracy and a judge and a jury and laws and policemen on the streets? And now nobody's got any freedom because we got to come up with all these laws and stuff. Why not just handle it? It's just a simple, natural response. You're going to try and hurt me, I'll try to defend myself. Some guy comes into town, starts doing terrible things. Everybody in town gets together, get a posse, we'll run him down, and we'll stop it. But that way, you keep it to its bare necessities. You keep it in the hands of the people that it needs to be in. Somebody steals from me, then I go and recuperate what they've taken. And that's fair. But if you've got some government, the state, that goes in, and now they've got a vested interest. They go hunt these people down because they're thieves, take their stuff, and then they keep it. Because you got to pay the police, and you got to pay the posse, and you've got to pay the court and the judge and all of this stuff. So by the time you're done, you're being robbed not only by the thief, but also by the government. And the government has no interest in other words, they don't care if somebody stole something from you. This has been going on for thousands of years. The government has no interest in you. Now they have an interest in keeping themselves in power. So government itself is a very, very evil in and of itself. They become the thieves. They become the murderers, the executioners. They start creating more laws and arbitrary laws and permits and legal requirements and prisons and all kinds of things. It just starts making life very, very unbearable. So we were talking on the way home before that, my daughter and I, and I started explaining to her this thing about Moses being up on his mountain, and I was explaining to her that it was a parable. And I said, Christianity has misunderstood all this time. They thought that the Old Testament was trying to teach us that we ought to have law, that we ought to have a judge, we ought to have a priest, that we should put to death people that didn't serve God, because that God was angry that you didn't serve him. And the first commandment was, thou shalt bow to me. And so we think that we're going to have a world where where it's just, then everybody's got to worship this one God that we've determined is God, that created these laws. It's a parable about the ego and the system that we just talked about that creates the people like the Joker and the Batman. The Batman is the law. He's crazy. Vigilante, right? He's going after, right? Because there's just injustice in the world, right? Batman's represents the crazy government. Joker represents the crazy people and the people rioting in the streets because of their injustices. See, both sides got injustices that they're trying to solve. One side's got born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and he doesn't understand justice. He only knows that his daddy died, the city's in commotion and rioting, and he's got to put a stop to it. And the only thing he knows is his technological advancements is going to put a stop to it. He doesn't know about the natural order. He blames the Joker for being evil. He blames us out here doing our mayhem and murder and corruption. But he doesn't understand. There's a reason why the Joker's crazy. There's a reason why Jack the Ripper was crazy. And it's partly due to Bruce Wayne's dad. It's due to Bruce Wayne himself and his money and his hypocrisy and his silver spoon. So who's the one that's really crazy? They're both crazy. See, I think people begin to watch the movie and they begin to think that, well, maybe we should all, there's a lot of people are going to say, well, I feel like the Joker. I feel like nobody's ever understood me. I'm going to be like him. He's my hero. I'm going to go out and create mayhem and start, and they're going to inspire people to be like him. Then you got other people who's going, no, I want to be the Batman. I want to be a police officer. Drive these fancy black and white cop cars, and have a gun and get the bad guy. And it's like, what? Now you're kind of crazy. So, when the real truth is that we don't need any kind of law. We don't need a face or a mask. We need to be who we are. You're not a Joker. You're not a Batman. You're just a person. A person who, from the very beginning of time, was created naturally from your Father, the source, the God of heaven, who is love, who cares about you. But somehow or another we strayed from that natural, peaceful existence. We cared about one another and we just didn't think so hard about how we could get the bad guy, but we thought a little bit harder about how we could love one another. And in that world, there wasn't very much violence at all, if ever, because it just didn't happen. It's like the Hopi Indians. They say there wasn't any crime amongst them. They didn't have judges and juries and policemen, and there just wasn't any crime. They found a tribe in Africa that had no crime. They've done research about this. But I think it's very interesting. There's people that are doing these movies in Hollywood that have some information. They have some unique perspective. They're certainly not just some writer, making this stuff up. Because they're putting this out as propaganda. They're twisting the story just a little so that you'll side with Batman or the Joker, never knowing that the truth is neither. I see so many people that I explain to them how the Old Testament is not our Father, that we don't need to be under law. We need to follow Jesus. They don't even know who Jesus is. Christianity, it's amazing. This morning, before I left, I told my daughter, I said, you know what's amazing? Is that you and I understand that what the Old Testament was. It's just a parable. And once you realize it's a parable and you start cracking the symbols and you start realizing, oh, so that's not our God. That's just trying to explain to us that we don't want to make our belly our God. Or some bearded, angry God on his mountain. That's the system we have. The system of law. The dispensation of error. The illusion. Because they wouldn't accept the love of the truth that they might be saved. You're saved by his grace, and that not of yourselves. It is a gift of God. Just love one another. But we Christians, we can understand a lot of nuances. We can understand Nietzsche and Kant and Heidegger, whatever. It's pretty hard to understand Heidegger. But at least we know that it was written as a philosophical teaching or example to derive the truth, to get to the bottom of what's really going on, what's real, what's Polaroid and what's not. Is it real or is it Polaroid? I knew a person one time that was mentally ill, and she used to say that to me. Is it real or is it a Polaroid? Because they're making the pictures and the movies and the mechanics and the machines so well now, you can't hardly tell the difference. Even the movies. You don't realize that they're very clever in their arguments, from Augustine down to Luther and Calvin and Hal Lindsey and whoever else was ever a great scholar, Genesius or Strong or Young. All of them, every one of them, missed the point entirely. And I hope you understand that you can't miss the point. Many of you some of you are arguing with me about, well, Dave, that's just stupid, to say we're not under law. You know that murder is bad, and you understand that Jesus didn't come to destroy the law. He didn't come to destroy the law. We've established that. Somewhere in there it says the law's good. Okay, we've established that. An eye for an eye. It's fine. The universe has a law, and it is whatsoever you do unto others, it shall be done unto you. That covers both laws. An eye for an eye. Tooth for a tooth. You have a choice. You can go by that side of it, the negative, the dark side, or you can go by the good side. Whatsoever you give, you shall receive. You don't have to worry about it. Then, if all you're doing is a giving, then all you're going to be doing is a receiving. And if you got all this stuff that you're receiving, you don't need to take. If you take, it shall be taken from you. What you met out shall be meted back to you. It's just a universal law. And so you got the negative and the positive. Moses went up on Mount Sinai, which is the moon, the lesser light, a reflection of the truth, not the real truth, an illusion, and he gave us the negative law, an eye for an eye. You can understand that. It's holy, it's true, but if you take it by the letter, it just means death. Sure, it's true. You deserve to die. If you kill, you shall be killed. But we know no man after the flesh. We don't follow after the flesh. This isn't even our world. This isn't even our kingdom. Who come up with this one? This isn't our kingdom. It's a very simple matter to pass over from death to life. You put yourself under another God, another law, part of a new kingdom, a different kingdom, and another covenant, entirely new covenant. Jesus came down off the mountain. He said, now listen very carefully. This is my law. Love one another. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Give and you shall receive. Whatever you met out shall be meted back to you. Actually, Jesus himself said it, not just Paul. Somebody said, well, Paul says the law was good. Well, it's good because it's taken spiritually. Because he says the law is spiritual. Spiritually, it's good. But, literally it means death. It still means death. That don't mean it's not good. But Jesus said it himself when he said, whatsoever you met out shall be meted out. An eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. He agreed with that. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He did agree with that. But the better way is to give so that you can receive, to love so that you can be loved, forgive so that you could be forgiven. If you don't forgive, you cannot be forgiven. So in other words, yes, if you murder, you shall be murdered. But what if you forgive and don't put that person to death? Then neither will you be put to death. Isn't that a better way? Because Jesus says, whoever has no sin, let him throw the first stone. You see, isn't it kind of stupid that we're going on the dark path, which is annihilation, genocide on everyone? That's the wrong path, you hypocrite. That's what Jesus called them, the lawyers and the scribes. They were hypocrites. What was he calling them hypocrite for? Was he saying that they were out running around partying and doing bad things and teaching it was bad but doing it? Not really. I don't think the Bible ever accuses the Pharisees of being immoral. They were probably very, very sincere teachers of the law. They probably, had never done anything, consciously on purpose to break the law. They were probably doing the best they could to keep that law. The only problem was they were blind. And Jesus says, you're all blind and you're leading the blind right into a pit. The blind leading the blind, the dead burying their dead. Because you see, if you keep the law, I don't care how good it is, you're required to die. Because you tell that person, you broke the law, you got to die, then you also must die. So this is the answer that nobody can understand. Nowhere in the New Testament, not anywhere in the New Testament. Think about this. Well, I don't know. This thing fell down. Let's see if we can get it back up here for a minute. All right. Sorry, guys. Nowhere in the New Testament does it ever say that Jesus worshiped the God of the Old Testament. He doesn't use the name Yahweh or Jehovah. And he actually says, your law, your father, he says, your father's the devil, my father's. What could he be talking about? He's talking to the Sanhedrin. He's talking to members of the Sanhedrin. He's talking to Nicodemus. He says, what, you got to be born again. He's like, well, I'm a member of the Sanhedrin. I've never heard of being born again. I never heard of the new covenant. I never heard of the resurrection to life. They didn't even believe in the resurrection. The Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection. So nowhere in the New Testament does Jesus ever say, I accuse you. Go look it up. Not one place. And I'm going to finish with this. The other day we did a video, and I think a lot of you watched the first part and got bored and didn't watch the last part. It's very important you watch the last part of the video if you can't watch the whole thing, because that's where I get into all the good stuff. But the one about Christmas, where Jesus was in the northern part up there in Galilee, and they were having a festival in the winter time, the festival of dedication stuff down there. Well, from the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles, all the way to the Feast of Dedication, which starts around September, the autumn equinox, and goes all the way down to Christmas time. That's where Jesus goes down in secret, in darkness. That's where the sun goes down, is defeated in hell, and conquers the god of hell. And he's down, but he's up in Galilee, and the disciples, they still hadn't believed in him. And he says, it's always prepared for you. You can go down, celebrate Christmas. You've always welcome to do that. But he says, I'm not going down. It's not my time. See, there's a specific time for Jesus to go down, for the sun to go down, and to come back up again. They didn't know or believe in that Christ, the inner Christ. They were still in the darkness, celebrating the old covenant. They didn't understand the stuff that we're talking about. And so they didn't recognize him. And they said, who are you? And he kept saying, you don't know me and you don't know my Father. If you had known me, you'd know my Father. What was he talking about? Well, he was talking about the fact that at the bottom of the wheel, in this carnal nature, under these laws, you're completely oblivious to the truth. You're missing the point. And he, in the 7th chapter of John, he talks about going up to the feast, going down to Jerusalem to the Feast of Tabernacles. He says, it's not my time, I'm not going, but you guys can go. And then he went up secretly and started preaching from the temple, from within. But they couldn't see him or understand him or recognize him. He says, I'm God, I'm now inside the temple. You're God, but you don't know who you are. Ye are gods, and the scripture cannot be broken. They couldn't grasp it. And then in the 8th chapter, it says he meets the woman who had been caught in adultery. And we talked about this in that other video. The woman that's caught in adultery is a very, very important teaching that you need to think about. Because if you're one who hasn't been persuaded yet that we're not under law, think very carefully about this. Jesus wasn't just coming across some person who had broke a law, and he wasn't saying, oh, well, I still believe in the law, but I'm also for forgiveness. Well, so let's just forgive her. But still, don't break the law. Still like that law of Moses. In your law it says, but I say, yeah, go ahead and keep the law. No, he says, but I say something completely different. You say keep the Sabbath, I say my Father keeps working until now I keep working. But in this case, not only did he forgive the woman for breaking one of the laws, because she was adulterous, caught in the act, but it's a symbol of the fact that we're no longer under the law of Moses, because that woman represents the church who's married to Yahweh, bound under the law of her husband until the day that they die, till death. And the ketubah and the law that binds her gives her her stipends and her wages, but requires her to be obedient unto death, or she can be stoned. Well, Yahweh claims all the way through the Old Testament that Israel was an adulterous woman, and he put her away. Jesus found the woman, and he forgave her. Same with the woman at the well. He says, you had 5 husbands, and the woman you're with right now, you're not even married to. That ain't even your husband. In other words, the 5 husbands, the 5 books of Torah, you used to go by the Torah, but you've just walked away. And now you're with some guy that's, you're living in, some would say sin, but she's living with another man. And Jesus would say, that's terrible. You should go back to your husband, or you should be stoned to death. Or, they said, what are you talking to a woman for? He's breaking all the laws. But what he said was, you know what? That's okay. If you'd have just asked me, I'd have given you eternal life. I'd give you eternal water, living waters. He didn't condemn her. He didn't condemn anybody. Not once, not one time. In fact, he says, I don't come to condemn you. You have one that condemns you, and that is Moses. I have come to give you life, and that more abundantly. Just think about it, friends. The woman caught in adultery represents all of us. He didn't tell her to go back to her husband. We're not supposed to go back to the old covenant, but he repurchased us. A bill, like a dollar bill of divorce, means you repurchase that person. We were married to Christ. And he says, you're not my slaves. A slave doesn't know what his master is doing. But look, I've told you all things that I do. You're my friends. So he bought us and set us free. And he came into Jerusalem. And as it says in Isaiah, he stood up on the pulpit in the synagogue. That was the only time he ever went to a synagogue, because he had to declare the good news to them and set them free. And he says, he stood up at the pulpit and he says, I've come to declare freedom and liberty to those that were bound. Because the Son of Man has set you free. And if the Son of Man has set you free, you're free indeed. So that's what I wanted to say, friends, today. We're running up on 48 minutes, 49 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and go. I hope you guys have a really great day. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good one.